Prince Loki is a good boy, but he's acting evil in order to protect the citizens of Elbaf, and all of this was set up by King Harold and, of all people, Mother Carmel. And I think that what we're in for is another classic One Piece tragedy as we discover the sacrifice made by Loki for the sake of his people. So let's talk about the initial impression of Prince Loki, which may have been designed to deliberately misguide us. Because going back on Loki's introduction, there is something very sneaky that I should point out, which is that our initial impression of Loki is set up long before we actually meet him. Because a few pages previous, a giant dude says, "The king had another official child known as the Accursed Prince. He committed all manner of evil acts and was sentenced to crucifixion a few years back, but nearly escaped his punishment. It took all of our warriors to get him under control. His desperate desire for a legendary devil fruit passed down through the Elbaf royal line led him to kill his father, King Harold, and eat the fruit. The next time that Loki, the Accursed Prince, is unleashed, the world will be brought to ruin. He is the shame of Elbaf." And these words are a very clever thing for Oda to do, because the words of this giant are priming us for Loki. Regardless of who Loki actually is in fictional reality, our introduction to him was colored by these words, some of those words being evil, accursed, punishment, ruin, shame, etc. So many bad things. So when we do actually meet Loki, that's what we're expecting. And because Loki doesn't present an immediate contrast to this, we assign all of those values to Loki regardless of whether or not it's accurate. Loki introduced himself as a resident of Warland, which once lived and breathed warfare. Loki, the sun god who brings the world to an end, which admittedly does sound quite intimidating and a bit not good, and so it gives the illusion of confirming everything that we heard about him earlier in the same chapter. These words about warfare, being a god, and ending the world make it very easy to assign values like evil, accursed, and shame. However, Loki hasn't actually said or done anything to confirm those values. Nor has he confirmed a value very close to my heart, being the value of award-winning flavor, but that is exactly why we have Fume, a superb some-flavored air device that is not a vape, contains no nicotine, uses no batteries. In fact, Fume cores are closer to herbal teas. The device itself is very wonderful, tactile, yeah, you can do this. It's pretty cool. But also this and a bunch of fun magnet-related stuff, which I personally find very helpful in my more anxiety, business-fueled portions of the day. It's not all fun and fictional pirates, but everything in general is much more fun with Fume. Because I've had one of these bad boys on my desk now for, 2 years? Question mark. Long time. And in all of that time, I've tried ever so many flavors of this one, but my favorite is always going to be orange vanilla. It's too good. But many other flavors are available, such as the cinnamon hearts core, to provide your day with that warm, comforting love of a pirate empress about to kick a puppy and a baby seal because they were put in her way by some inconsiderate serf. I hate inconsiderate serfs. But Fume are also backed by doctors in the US and continuously invest in third-party studies to ensure the safety of their products. And Fume have now served over 300,000 customers, including me, and you can be another by clicking my link in the description. And if you order the Journey Pack, which is pretty cool and you should, then you can use my code GRANDLINEREVIEW to get a free Fume topper, an awesome accessory to level up your experience. Highly recommended, especially because it's free. So just go to tryfume.com/GrandLineReview or scan the QR code on screen. And thank you so much to Fume because it's their sponsorship that allows us to bring you the best fictional pirate content possible as often as possible. So definitely try them out, but for now it's back to you. Me. And this is the same sort of principle as why social media, and in fact media in general, can be quite dangerous. Because if you hear someone state that this person over here that you've never met is evil, then you're going to be viewing all of that person that you've never met's actions and statements through that lens of evil, whether you realize it or not. Someone else has colored your perception. And while that's a bit of a concerning issue in the real world, no one cares about that because it's story time now. And in the story realm, this is a simple but incredible tool for writers to use to mislead their readers. And I personally bought into it. Those 2 initial Loki chapters had me 90-something% convinced that he was going to be the major antagonist of this arc. And in retrospect, that was a colored conclusion because I wasn't judging Loki. I was judging the words of this guy, who according to the One Piece wiki is named Quintuple ? So for now, we'll just call him Mark for short, but this dude doesn't even have a real name yet. He may as well have been a completely anonymous Reddit poster character, and yet his words shaped my entire view of Loki. And I'm sure that Mark means well, but in situations like this, we should be looking for a more reliable source, and we do have one. Because our future Pirate King may not know how to navigate, but when it comes to people, his moral compass is more finely tuned than anyone else in this world. And the one thing that did consistently give me pause for thought with Loki is how comfortable Luffy is around him. And I mean this quite literally. When they met, Luffy decided to casually and comfortably lie down on Loki, and in many ways it's a lot easier to look at Luffy from the perspective of being a wild animal than a human. He mainly operates on instincts and vibes. And here Luffy wasn't just comfortable with Loki, but he actually deliberately sought Loki out when he felt his presence on the bridge. So to Luffy, Loki actually possesses an attractive quality, something that makes others want to be around him, which is a trait that Luffy himself has. The ability that Dracula Mihawk once called the most dangerous in the world. So we can add that to the pile of Luffy-Loki similarities. But for a man imprisoned in the underworld, Loki has a very active social life and a long list of allies. In chapter 1131, it's revealed that Loki has a legion of colossal animal loyalists who Luffy makes friends with instantly, but who Loki also describes as friends. And we really should not ignore any use of the F word. Most traditional bad guys don't tend to use the word friend, especially when it comes to animals. It's more something along the lines of, these are my underlings, these are my beasts. And given that Loki's friends are the same animals from One Piece Strong World, it's worth stating that Golden Lion Shiki only ever spoke of these animals as tools, which is the standard One Piece bad guy way to view the existence of others. This is a very simplistic way to view things, but it does work more often than not with One Piece. If a character is able to form a genuine friendship with an animal, then they tend to be more on the good side of the spectrum. Think of characters like Vivian, Karoo, Brook and Laboon, Konus and Sue, Gaimon and all of his weird friends. There aren't that many antagonists who have that sort of camaraderie with an animal. And if they do have animals, it's more to use them like the Arlong pirates did with Momu and like the Caribou pirates did with Momu again. But not only that, it isn't just animals. Loki also has a group of human followers in the underworld, which he describes as follows. Those other little ones are humans who chose to do battle with Elbaf. They wear stinking robes to turn away the ravenous beasts, but they only delay the inevitable. They are corpses already. And to these rather harsh words, Loki's followers respond with, "Now that's really uncalled for, sir," which is a pretty hilarious response to being called a corpse, and it gives me the impression that Loki was acting when he described his human followers, and that the human followers know Loki well enough to know that what he's saying isn't actually how he feels. It's almost as if Loki needs to maintain a certain appearance with Luffy, or a certain appearance in general, one that we now know is almost certainly a facade. But again, Loki is portrayed as less of an underworld prisoner and more of a Disney princess. He seems to attract friends and allies from every direction, even those who aren't able to be here physically, as we discover in chapter 1134, which came with a pretty big translation gap between the scans and the official, and the gap in question did unfortunately occur during Loki's section when he's on the snail phone to either Mossa or Shaggy, depending on which translation you read. The official translation went with Shaggy, which is a bit, zoink Scoob, but it's probably about as well as this could have been translated, because Mossa Mossa is an onomatopoeia that's often used to refer to someone who is excessively hairy, shaggy, and is generally not well put together. And so there's an overall impression of poor hygiene and personal grooming. And part of this definitely comes across because the Denden Mushi is projecting quite a hairy fella on the other end. However, something that gets completely lost in the official translation is that Loki uses an honorific in this conversation. He refers to Shaggy or Mossa as Mossa Ko, and there's been a lot of internet linguists looking into this honorific because it's quite unusual. And what they have discovered is that Ko is an antiquated honorific used for ye old nobility, and the conclusion from here is that this Mossa that Loki is speaking to is part of some royal family. Not necessarily on Elbaf, however, the interpretation of native Japanese speakers is completely different. To native speakers, the Ko honorific seems to be used in a more mocking way, in the same sort of way that we would sarcastically refer to someone as sire or my lord. It's not something that you would take seriously, but it is hard to tell which case it is, because Elbaf is a land that's very much trapped back in time, and a lot of the other giants do have other antiquated ways of speaking. So Loki could be talking to someone of royal lineage, or he could be giving someone a cute ironic nickname. And actually, if you're familiar with Hachiko, also known as the greatest dog to have ever lived and who inspired Oda to create Choo Choo, he is a perfect example of this. The Ko in Hachiko is this honorific. But regardless, for an evil being, king murdering, ruin wanting, shame bringing incarnate of pure destruction, Loki Loki sure does have a lot of friends, doesn't he? And that's because deep down, Loki has a bit of the K word going on, as Mossa and or Shaggy stated. I've recently realized that those fearsome words of yours hide your kindness. And now Loki didn't take kindly to this accusation of kindness, and we'll get to that shortly. But firstly, we don't know how long Loki has been speaking to his long-distance friend. However, it's likely to have been at least a few years at this point, and it took all of that time for Loki's friend to realize that his strong, powerful, brutal words are acting as a shroud to his kindness. But that's something that Luffy realized immediately. Luffy wasn't bothered by any of Loki's words, except for what he said about Shanks, but otherwise it didn't matter how vividly horrible Loki's descriptions were or how volatile his threats were. Luffy's mind just translated all of that as, hey, Straw Hat Man, wanna be friends? Which is why he's apparently gone on to make a deal with Loki and is keeping it a secret in the same way that small children do. So I think the good guy Loki is becoming a pretty solid thought. But it does come with 3 very important questions to answer. Firstly, even after having said all of this, Loki does appear to have a genuine hatred for the concept of kindness, so we need to figure out why that is. Secondly, and this could be connected to the first part, but we need to establish why Loki does verbally portray himself in the most unfriendly and apocalyptic of ways. And finally, and potentially most difficultly, you know what? I'm not doing it again. We're sticking with difficultly. We need to explain why Loki killed his father, Harold, because that's probably the biggest obstacle in the good guy Loki hypothesis. But let's start with kindness. This is the one aspect of Loki that I can confidently say is not an act. He has a solid hatred of kindness, and initially I thought that this could have something to do with the Lola situation, because from what we've seen of the vaguely shaped Loki of this time, he was a much happier, gentler individual, and his aversion to kindness may have to do with Lola's rejection of him. The idea is that Loki was as kind as he could possibly be, and that's what left him open, that's what left him vulnerable to being hurt the most, which would be a pretty big blow to the strongest warriorman of Elbaf. For all of his muscle and battle power, he was unable to protect his heart from being broken. However, I don't think that's it, and if it is, I don't think it's everything. I guess it could definitely be a part of it, a greater theme as to why Loki despises kindness, but we should actually look back a little further, because one of the kindest people we've ever been introduced to in One Piece was Mother Carmel, the lovable saint who dedicated her life to others and ran an orphanage on Elbaf where nothing bad ever happened at all. And look, if it did, it certainly didn't have anything to do with child trafficking. Mother Carmel is the perfect illustration of the danger of kindness, because being kind is almost universally seen as a positive value. But people who are overly kind can be taken advantage of, or they can take advantage of others with that kindness if they so desired, which is exactly what Carmel did. She used her kindness as a poison pill to set up and manage her business of selling children to the world government. However, that is not the only influence that Carmel had on this world, and we may be seeing Carmel's legacy playing out on Elbaf as we speak. So to be clear, Loki was born in the same year that Carmel died, so this aversion to kindness or faux kindness would not have been caused by her directly. However, there is another almost sickeningly beloved individual on this island known as the late King Harold, the one that Loki allegedly murdered, and King Harold has been credited as the one who changed Elbaf and brought it into a new age with the philosophy of, quote, don't fight with other countries, trade with them, which is a lovely idea. I like it a lot, but it wasn't Harold's idea, it was Carmel's idea. In Big Mom's flashback, Charles says, Carmel's ideas about trade over plunder are all well and good, but we must not forget that we are warriors, which is a line that comes back to smack us right in the sabos in chapter 1134, because it appears that King Harold adopted Carmel's philosophy. Now, being as generous as I can be, this means that Carmel accidentally set Elbaf on the path to peace, that her horrid existence did actually have a surprisingly positive impact in the world. However, to be as not generous as I can, perhaps being taken in by Carmel's words implies that King Harold was on a bit of a similar wavelength to Carmel, and him adopting her philosophy could indicate that the kind, benevolent, and universally beloved King Harold may have been none of those things it is that I just said, and was another figure abusing kindness for his own very unkind goals. And this is the faux kindness that Loki would have been exposed to. And I would propose that one day Loki discovered what Harold's plans were. He saw his father, the truth of his father, for the first time, and on that day he realized that everything Harold presented himself to be was a lie. lie. And as for what Harold's end goal could have been, one idea is working with the world government to demilitarize Elbaf, as it is the last army in the world that the world government actually fears, and King Harold may have been planning to sell his own people for whatever benefits the world government offered him, much like York did with Egghead Island. So Loki discovers this, and as a man who doesn't like bad things, he wants to put a stop to it, which resulted in the death of King Harold. I say death because I'm not 100% convinced that Loki actually killed him. Oda likes to keep his protagonist pretty undisputedly pure, and if Loki is a good guy after all, then I think there's going to be more to this Harold incident than we've been led to believe. Something that keeps Loki's hands clean, but this could also explain why Loki is doing absolutely nothing at all to try and prove his innocence. Because Loki saw how kindness was abused, and he decided to go in the exact opposite direction, to become a villain worthy of fear. And when I say that, I mean to be feared by the world government, thus resulting in his special bounty of 2.6 billion berries, but also resulting in the protection of Elbaf. As if Loki's very existence is giving the giants of Elbaf a reason to stay strong, something that ensures they will never completely demilitarize and embrace 100% peace, because at any point the demonic Loki could escape the underworld and destroy them all. So they need to be strong and ready in the event that he does, and that strength is what stops the world government coming in and taking Elbaf for themselves. It's slightly complicated, but this is also very classic One Piece. The idea of a tragic figure putting up this villainous act for years for the sake of his people. Other notable examples of this could include Kozuki Oden, who danced Naked for 5 years for the sake of the people of Wano, or Bartholomew Kuma embracing the role of a tyrant for Jewelry Bonnie, or even the Kokoyashi villagers acting like they hated Nami in order to give her an opportunity to flee and be safe without worrying about them. And even without that established framing, One Piece does have a rather well-established trope of island citizens hating the person most looking out for their best interests, such as the people of Alabasta rising up against King Cobra, or the hatred of King Riku on Dressrosa after Doflamingo framed him, or say Hody Jones rallying support against King Neptune, and so on and so forth. It happens a lot, so it wouldn't be surprising if it's happening again, because it's a very powerful device. Transmuting a character's desire to protect their people into hatred directed at them from the people, and then further transmuting that into tragedy when everyone realizes what fools they've been and what that person has suffered through this entire time. Because other than this Harold incident, we still have yet to see or hear evidence of Loki even harming another giant. Because remember the words of Mark, the king had another official child, known as the Accursed Prince. He committed all manner of evil acts and was sentenced to crucifixion a few years back, but nearly escaped his punishment. It took all of our warriors to get him under control. And a lot of people interpreted that as Loki attacking the giants as the bad, evil man he is. But to me, it sounds more like Loki tried to escape and the rest of the giants went after him. And even Loki's offer to Luffy to destroy a pirate crew can be seen in quite a moral way. Loki doesn't offer to destroy just anyone. He specifies that it has to be the kind of people who are generally considered the criminals of the world. But there is one thing that's stopping me from fully converting to the good guy Loki hypothesis, which is that he did say that the first thing he was going to do after being released would be to kill Luffy. And he didn't say this out loud. This was a thought, so I can't claim that he's acting on this one. And sure, it could be an exaggeration. In English, we do that all the time. It's a bit weird when you think about it, but saying that you're gonna kill someone is a fairly common way of describing how very upset you are with them. So look, it's not 100% yet, but with every chapter of Elbaf, it's looking like this Loki business is not as simple as it initially seemed. And in 2025, what we could be seeing is the redemption of Prince Loki. And thank you so much again to Fume for sponsoring this video. Definitely check them out through the link in the description.